Welcome back to the Cornelius Seed podcast. I'm your host, Juan, and today I'm joined by Craig Allaman, our lead agronomist. Welcome, Craig.
Hey, thank you, Juan. Good to be here.
Likewise, we're going to dive into side dressing corn. We're going to talk about, if you want to do it, why you want to do it. We're going to feed your crop to boost some yields and save money. So let's talk about, why side dressing matters first, if you will, Craig.
Well, that's always a question of does it matter? We have to
Okay.
get into that first, and we get into the great nitrogen debate in general, which is always interesting, and there's a lot of opinions on it. And as far as the forms of nitrogen, the timing, and things like that. Now, I will say I always say a lot of times when people ask me about their nitrogen source or their nitrogen program is you tell me what your program is, and I can find a study that shows you that's the best program there is. Okay. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of approaches that'll work. A lot of times it's soil type dependent. That's very important, and we'll really get into that here with the side dress issue. Um, and then you need to be practicing testing, finding out what works best on your farm and in your situation, and in your practices as well. So whether it's no-till, conventional tillage, strip tillage, whether you've got sand, whether you've got heavy black, high organic matter soils, those things will make a ton of difference. Um, the year makes a difference. Some years, just in an example field, some years side dressing nitrogen will pay, other years it won't. So weather from the point you side dress on can make a big difference in that. How much, how good, how moist the soil is, how warm it is. Are we going to mineralize a lot of organic matter to give us a lot of nitrogen that year or not? Those things can all play into effect. So I I really try to stay away from in the nitrogen because I don't believe there is an answer that covers every acre. I try to stay away from saying this is the best way to do it. On my own farm, we're a lot of heavy black, high organic matter soils. We can hold nitrogen really well. Okay, so we put on our entire amount of nitrogen pre-plant incorporated right ahead of the pretty much right ahead of the planter, work it in with the field cultivator, and we don't lose that nitrogen through the year. I mean, we've been very careful to test that through the years. I can take tissue samples at tasseling time frame and prove that I have enough nitrogen in the plant at that critical time period with the practice that we do. Now, I used to work when I was in retail just 10 miles west of here, southwest in those river bottoms east of Burlington, Iowa. Um, Pure sand in a lot of those cases, so, to black sand, but very coarse soil. Those guys are all using pivots. They're putting on 32, multiple times through the year because their soils cannot hold that nitrogen. So as soon as it turns into the nitrate form, it's going to leach down very rapidly through that sandy soil. So that's what I'm getting to when I say it depends on what your situation is. Now, as a general rule of thumb, what I will say is I am very, very much against putting nitrogen out there on the surface and not getting it locked in the soil. And we can lose our nitrogen by doing that. It can like if we put urea out there, we get a little bit of a popcorn shower and get it a little bit wet, not enough to take it into the ground. That's going to go ahead and turn into a gas, and we'll lose that into the atmosphere. So, blowing dry urea out there, I'm not a big fan of it. Now, some situations, that's the only choice we have. We try to do it ahead of, a decent rain prediction, so that rain will go ahead and get that locked into the soil. So that's where I do a pre-plant incorporated. I take the field cultivator, I put it into the soil so I can't lose it up into the air. So when we're side dressing, even though there's a lot of options out there, I like getting it knifed into the soil. So whether that's just a disc opener, and then dribbling in behind that so it gets down into the soil or knives or whatever it is, as opposed to dribbling it. I don't like dribbling it, next to the row like we see. That's the Y drops and everything. It's fine if it works for you. I'm happy for that. But you do have to get a rain to get it locked into the soil, and it's a lot of money to. And if you're putting it on there and you're expecting to get yield out of it, and then you lose it, that it's not done you any good. So I will go so far as to say it's not my preference is to leave it just onto the soil. So then we get into the timing of it. So, we use V6 is kind of the magical stage where the plant use of nitrogen really shoots up. But, somewhere between the V4 and the V8, that's when the plant really starts using that nitrogen. Some studies will show having nitrogen right ahead of tasseling, is an important time frame to do that. But if you're too late on the backside of tasseling, you can really lose a lot of yield. So what I'm saying there is you can get too cute with your timing. And of course, when you're side dressing, it can't be muddy to go out there and put that on. So I think you start at that V4, V5 stage, try to finish by V8. And then when it's dry enough, you can get out there and get it on, and the plant's going to have it to utilize. You would assume if you're side dressing that you haven't put enough on ahead of time. So if you miss that window for some reason, that's going to be a bad deal for your production, and then you'll probably have to blow it on with an airplane or something like that. And again, leave it on the surface at that time. So, again, just like any time with nitrogen, it's a source and it's a timing and it's a placement, issue.
Okay. Well, thank you. I mean, you covered a lot there. So just to kind of recap a little bit, it's really
I didn't let you talk there for a while, did I?
no, that's gonna make Carrie Ann real
I know
happy.
that I know that bothers you.
Did you saw me squirming? Perfect. The that's awesome. I mean, really, you say this a lot. You say it all the time. Is folks will know what's best for the operation. But really, the call out here, or is when we talk about it, and why we promote um, products like Pivot Bio on seed is to help in situations where you might have those real sandy soils that allow for leaching, or maybe really heavy clay soils, right? Um, what about soils with low organic matter? Does it matter there?
Yeah, and so the lower the organic matter or the larger the texture of the soil, like a sandy soil, there's less capability of that soil to hold that nitrogen, so you can have more leaching. Lower organic soil is not going to produce as much, through mineralization of the organic matter. So that those are the situations where a side dress, no doubt, can really be a benefit to your program. And that if you're side dressing, I'm assuming you've tested it and know that it really works in your program. Just because I'm not doing it on heavy organic matter soils doesn't mean it's not a good practice where you're doing it. So I always default back to we're all doing what we think and or know, is the best for our individual farming operations. So, you've hit it there. I mentioned sand, and those guys, if you're sand, you're probably putting it on through a pivot. You're not side dressing it, but same thing. You're putting it on at different timings and stretching that out, so that you have it throughout the season. You mentioned pivot bio, that V6 stage. That's kind of when pivot bio is really kicking in and producing that nitrogen on the roots that the plant's taking in. And do that from V6 kind of through the tasseling stage, slightly after tasseling. So it's kind of the same thing. That's when you're putting the side dress on, when that plant's really utilizing it.
Well, no, thank you. I mean, it sounds like timing is really critical, right? There's that sweet spot. Um, and I mean, it sounds like you said roughly about 24 to 30 days after emergence, catching that V4 window. What happens if growers miss that window?
Well, that's why if if you could do everything at the perfect timing, that'd be awesome. But we in agriculture and farming, we deal with the weather, you know. So if V6 is perfect, you know, and V6 V at V8, the roots have grown together in the middle of a 30-inch row. Okay. So if you put it on at V6 and you put it right down the center of the row, you're not slicing roots as you apply the nitrogen. So V6 probably is perfect timing, you know. But if we don't know what the weather is going to be like, it's much better to get it on a little bit earlier than it is to get rain at right when you're ready to put it on at V6 and maybe it's V10 before you get back in, you
Mm.
know. So if you do miss that window, there's still options. We can put nitrogen on with post sprayers, you know. I mentioned the Y drops where they're dribbling it on right by the row. It's not my preference because again, you're just dribbling on the top of the ground. You've got to get rain to work it in. Some of those, I believe, some of those post machines can knife that in. I mean, they can run disc openers to do that with. We also put nitrogen on with the airplanes. You know, dry urea. The airplane will put it on as kind of as fly it on and get our nitrogen needs met. When we do that, a lot of times, you know, we'll put a nitrification inhibitor on there to keep that urea from breaking down into the form where it would go up in the atmosphere a little bit longer than normal. So there are still things we can do, but we're into a rescue time frame there, not as a planned program when we get to that point. So that's why we take advantage of our windows when we get them, and we start on the early side, knowing that you know we may get rained out and miss that ideal window.
Well, thank you. I kind of appreciate you mentioned. I've never thought about that concept before that, and it makes sense just how gigantic the roots are. Is that, you got 30-inch rows they're kind of together now, right? So there's even a risk of, knifing it in at that point. So how does a grower know how much nitrogen to apply? I mean, and
There's all kinds of university studies that have been done on that. You just search your like if you're in Iowa, search your and I would do it state by state because the states are starting to get much more specific. You know, we used to have that nitrogen rate calculator that was it was all the Midwest universities had went together and came up with this data. Iowa has a new one, so I don't know what the website is. You guys can probably put it on here, but just go to Iowa State Extension and search for the nitrogen rate calculator. They have a new one that gets much more specific with soil types and specific regions. I think you can go down to just the county, you know, within the state. Before, I think they just had two regions in Iowa. So, um, because there's such difference in soil types and, you know, north to south, temperature and things like that, it's important, I think, that these tools have gotten more specific. University of Illinois has one the same way. I know a new one that they have developed, and it looks like it's a great improvement over what the you know the conglomerate used to be. They'll get very specific with soil types and you know planting dates, cost of nitrogen, things like that. So it's pretty easy to find access to that information.
um, yeah, I just typed up nitrogen calculator for my state, and you mentioned the Iowa one. That's a pretty slick one for for the folks that are around here, nfact.ag and dash fact.ag. And as Craig mentioned, it can give it to you by region or by county. And so um, it's pretty neat. So no, thank you for that, Craig.
Yeah, I know
Uh,
earlier in the winter when we uh, were doing a meeting there, I did compare the old one to the new one, and boy, the recommendation was significantly different by using the new one. So
well, it sometimes, you wonder, have we been overusing or over applying nitrogen all along? And I know that's something sometimes a debatable topic, and I'm not even suggesting that we hit it now, but it's interesting to hear you say that whenever you compare the old versus the new and see that there are different recommendations for sure. All right, so we've hit about knowing how much to apply, which essentially means is use your state resources ideally. So you've kind of already talked about some risks along the way of side dressing, whether you're getting out there too soon and maybe you've got some soil compaction because it's not dry enough, or maybe slicing it through. But let's kind of recap that is what can go wrong with side dressing and how can growers avoid those pitfalls?
There's probably there's pro there's probably some side dressing still that goes on with anhydrous ammonia. Used to do a lot of that, not so much anymore. You still have to be careful that you don't burn the roots with that. When you put NH3 on, it's going to rob moisture. It's going to rob another hydrogen off of the H2O, so water. Um, if it's touching the roots when it's doing that, it's going to rob the water right out of the roots and burn those roots. So you'd want to put it on at pretty good depth, and put it on a little earlier than you normally would. It's more stable in the soil anyway because it's going to all be ammonium. It's not going to any of it going to be nitrate right away. So you should be able to go on earlier with NH3. But ensure you get out there timely enough. So take those windows and again, you're putting on 32%, only 25% of it is in that form that's going to be susceptible to leaching right away. The others have to break down into nitrate to get to that point. So don't worry about going on the early side. Take that window when it presents itself to you and get that on. And if you get too late, there still are some options that you can utilize to get there. And it's better to take those options rather than not have enough nitrogen. You get to tasseling time frame, kick into reproduction, and don't have enough nitrogen, and it's not going to be a good October for you.
No, especially if if it pans out to be a drier year, right? Well, I mean, and thank you for covering it that way because and you've cut out a little bit there, but I mean, essentially those risks there being, foliar burn or root damage, right? As it relates to the plant. So, we want to make sure that we're planning ahead and we're using the right tools or hiring folks that are using the right tools and and putting that nitrogen really where it belongs. Is there a need to test the soils?
If it's a planned program, you already know what you probably are planning to put on. I mean, it's what you've left out of what you would normally put on. If you're putting on 150, pounds of nitrogen total and you've got 110 on, and you're probably planning on side dressing 40. But if it's a situation where maybe your soils have been saturated, you feel like you've lost some nitrogen, either from, nitrates leaching down in the soil or from denitrification in ponded areas where nitrogen will turn into a gas, the nitrate, and leave the soil that way. Then you may have a question of, have I lost some nitrogen? What should I put on ahead of time? You can do a, pre-side dress nitrogen test. You can take a soil sample and send that in, and they'll give you a recommendation as to how much, you are deficient in your soil at that point in time. So that is definitely a tool that's in the toolbox for you.
Okay. Well, great. Um, all right. Well, I think we've hit that all. And folks, as I mean, pretty much to recap there, we want to side dress there, but that V4 to V8 being that sweet spot. That'll definitely help you out with better yields or better chance for it. And make sure you go to our show notes. You can check out links to the nitrogen calculators for your state. Um, At any rate, thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions, go ahead and send them in to us or reach out to any of our district sales managers. And you can find us on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, X, the whole gamut of it. So until the next one, thank you.